Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in this world, and welcome to today's Security Boulevard webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for the event, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar on tap today, but before we do get started with it, I want to remind the audience that today's event is being recorded. So if you miss any or all of the event, you'll be able to access it on demand. Everyone who registers for the event will be receiving a link to the webinar on demand, and you can access it there at any time. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the webinar, Draft and Develop, a Solution to the Cybersecurity Skills Shortage. Our speakers today are Martin Rues, the CISO at Outreach.io, and Hank Schless from ThreatStack. Welcome to gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, Martin, I'm going to go ahead and turn it right over to you and let you work your magic.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Today, I'd like to talk about how we at Outreach are solving the security skills gap to build a world-class security team. As we all know, it's hard to find and hire good security talent. All of the best ones have jobs, and they're usually well paid. In fact, 72% of firms say they're finding it difficult to identify and hire high caliber cybersecurity talent. And why is that? Well, because the modern security professional is somewhat of a unicorn. In order to meet those high salaries, we often try to hire someone with breadth and depth to fill multiple roles. Today's candidates need a combination of DevOps, security, and cloud experience, and finding recruits who check all those boxes is a time-consuming exercise, often with low yield. This being the case, you would think the security community would try and come up with some creative solutions. Well, that's what we've done at Outreach, especially after it took me 6 months to hire my last security role. This is what my recruiting team looked at me. I told them it was going to take about that long. They didn't believe me. After that amount of time, they now believe me. Which is why I decided to leverage an apprenticeship program that we have at Outreach, something that was put in place not just for security, but for roles across the company. One of our core values is we've got your back, and that extends to our internal employees in a number of ways, including making sure that they have a career path that interests them and that they're qualified for. So I've drafted and developed internally twice now. The first time I did it, I drafted directly from our engineering team. And one of our engineers had approached me about joining the security team. He had an interest in security, and it took a while for him to decide that, yes, he really wanted to do this as a career. And in fact, last year at Black Hat, he and I sat down for beers. I told him what the role was going to be like. And a week later, he joined my team. And he was on the team for 6 months. Now, he didn't go through our formal apprenticeship program, but he made a huge impact and helped further my relationship with our engineering team, something that's essential in the DevOps world. And something that we use ThreatStack to help us enable. My second candidate was a security analyst. I needed somebody on my team to help administer and monitor the alerts that were coming through tools like ThreatStack. That individual, believe it or not, started out in inside sales. Yeah, you heard me right. He was one of our inside sales reps. Then he moved on to my team to be an IT admin. And from there, he gained an interest working with me and watching what is involved in becoming a security professional. So how do we do it? Well, 90 days to success. Our apprenticeship program is a program that lasts for 3 months. There's a lot of pre-work that's involved. All candidates have to go through an on-site interview, the same as if they were coming in from external. An onboarding plan must be written up and approved by HR, the current manager, and the new manager. And that plan has to be presented, and all key stakeholders have to agree on it. And then finally, we have to determine, well, what is the role? So if successful, when will the transition date occur? Are the roles and responsibilities clear to the candidate and to HR and everybody else? And then you're able to move forward. Of note, however, is we only allow this for employees that are in good standing. So employees that have already received good performance reviews, employees that have had these conversations openly, which is another one of our core values, so that everybody goes into this with eyes wide open. And each one of these comes with a contingency plan, meaning it is possible that somebody goes through the apprenticeship program and they're not cut out for the role. I am happy to say that has not happened for me yet. And I think a large part of that is because of the program we've put in place, and for this role specifically because of our partnership with ThreatStack. So I needed a security analyst, and it's actually this guy. He gave me permission to use this picture, and we needed to take him from this kind of even almost junior IT admin role and really turn him in to a security analyst. This is how I defined that role. You can see we've got a couple of specific things in here, but the biggest part of this really is as our internal analyst, administering and monitoring alerts in ThreatStack. But he has a number of other roles. ThreatStack is not his only role, and he's taken all of these on and is so far doing an amazing job for somebody that had previously zero experience in security. So how do we measure his success? Well, as we developed his onboarding plan, we talk about basic training and the advanced stuff. What are the basics that he's going to need to know to even be able to talk intelligently within the role? And then the advanced components, which are what are those deeper skills and set of expertise, and can we get those under his belt, or at least the beginnings of those, within 3 months? Not an easy thing to do, so you need to be dedicated to doing it. And thankfully, we have good support across our company for doing this kind of a thing. So his basic training, ThreatStack admin training. This year we hired, we added ThreatStack's managed service to help us with this. And I explicitly asked that part of that be to train this new analyst. We've asked him to do security documentation deep dives. We have a lot of documentation on how our platform is secured and architected. We have a lot of security policies and procedures. As you can imagine, any mature company has a number of regulatory certifications and the documentation to go with that. And so I wanted him to get the breadth and understand how we think about security all up, and then get real specific on his role in terms of the monitoring and responding component. And then the advanced stuff, our plan this year was for him to culminate all of this training at Black Hat with a set of trainings there that without the basics in place, I think he would have struggled to understand the deep dive trainings at the conference. And then as well as working more deeply with ThreatStack on advanced analyst training. So not just the administration components of the platform, but how do you as an analyst interpret alerts that are coming through? How do you think about suppressing those or chasing them down with your DevOps team? But didn't all start with just an onboarding plan. We also have this concept of zero-day indoctrination. And it's not the 0 day you're thinking of. This is, how does this even start? How does somebody become interested in moving to a new career, and in this case, into a career in security, especially coming from inside sales? Well, Mike came from inside sales, which meant he knew our platform. He knew our customers. I think having that level of understanding from an external standpoint is incredibly important for understanding why an alert or a security incident in our platform might be important, not only to outreach, but to our customers as well. So he came with that experience. He had some background in IT, and he wanted to get back to the technical aspect. As he spent 2 years on my team as an IT admin, I asked him to configure things for security purposes. So he started to get a taste for why. And as a curious individual, he would ask, well, okay, why would we do it this way instead of that way? So we began that indoctrination early. My intent was not to recruit him, but it resulted in an interest and a passion for security. And as he became more interested and we started to think about his apprenticeship, I made sure before we ever kicked off those 90 days that he was actively participating in our sit reps and planning sessions, that he's included on our security aliases and Slack channels, and can see what's coming across the pipe and how I and other members of the team are responding, so that he can learn by osmosis. Also important is threat stack. This is a key to Mike's apprenticeship this year. And for us, we've had threat stack now for almost 2 years. For the first year, we put it in place. I worked with my engineering team to get it rolled out. I needed IDS for the cloud, and I needed a platform that was comprehensive, that could give me everything from the CIS benchmark for AWS security configuration, as well as alert me to strange user activity and do some level of file integrity monitoring. ThreatStack is an incredibly comprehensive platform that gives me all of that. But as with most comprehensive platforms, that also means it's complex and it requires some tuning. So this year, we went with ThreatStack's co-managed service. As with a smaller security team, their maturity framework was something that makes it a lot easier for me to tell our infrastructure security story internally to my stakeholders. We use ThreatStack to demonstrate compliance to our auditors. We're an ISO 27001 and a SOC 2 Type 2 certified organization. The ThreatStack is a cornerstone of a lot of the evidence that we provide for those audits. And it supports our DevOps approach. We manage our entire environment as code, including our infrastructure. And so ThreatStack really helps us manage that. And they're growing with us. As we move toward containerization, we're working very closely with ThreatStack to make sure we can continue to use it to monitor the security of our containers. In that process, Mike is learning all of these things: how to administer ThreatStack and how to think about the alerts that come through it. So we started with some basic training to familiarize himself with ThreatStack's features and offerings, to review why we went with ThreatStack instead of others. When I first chose it, I partnered with engineering to choose the platform, and we went through a number of vendors, but it was a choice between engineering and I, and Mike wasn't involved. I think it's important for my analyst to understand why we chose this platform, so that he's then bought in and is helping us tune it for our needs. So as we look further into the platform and train Mike up on it, there are some integrations that I want him to gain an expertise to do, because for me, it's important or any platform to work within my engineering team's ergonomics. So ThreatStack offers an API and some integrations, but I'm going to look to my analysts to help configure those and partner with our DevOps and engineering team to make sure that if an alert comes through, they see it when we see it, so that there's not this serialized alert triage process that we're all working together at the same time. But that Mike is the one who's the expert in what's happening because he's looking at it every day. So I've talked a lot about ThreatStack as one of our curriculum sources, but we had quite a few others in order to make Mike's apprenticeship successful. In an earlier slide, I talked about a deep dive into our engineering and security processes, where we have a lot of documentation. This is essentially giving Mike access to Confluence and saying, go read it, all of it, and then come back with questions. And for some of those questions, make sure that you're asking the engineers directly. Don't come to me. That part of the apprenticeship is to ensure that he's forming those relationships and partnerships with other members of our organization. And then obviously our interactions with ThreatStack and their managed service, the Black Hat trainings that Mike will be going to, and then keeping our finger on the pulse of certifications. Often security certifications come with an experience requirement that Mike may not have, being new to the role, but they also come with great study material. So if he can read through that, study it up, that just gives him yet more breadth and depth in the security space. And as he gains experience, we will look at certifications that make sense for him, his career and his role. So all of this really culminated in what I consider ThreatStack episode 2. We had it for a year, we had it in place, we were doing a little bit with it, but I didn't have somebody dedicated to it. Now I have a dedicated security analyst who has worked with myself, and ThreatStack has worked with us to document our security posture, define what that looks like, what our priorities are. We've partnered with ThreatStack and brought in our own engineer to help scope, plan, and implement some of the tuning that we're putting in place, all with my new security analyst's involvement. And one thing I want to stop here on is, and also with engineering's involvement, the day that the infrastructure engineer working with us on this ran back to his boss and said, there is so much more we could be doing to secure our infrastructure. To me, that is more of a win than actually tuning down the alerts and getting better numbers in ThreatStack. I now have a partner in engineering who's excited about this. And a lot of that has come from our partnership with ThreatStack, tuning the environment, talking about the maturity framework, how we think about it, and all of that. So I've kind of gotten the 2-for-1 deal here. I've got a security analyst trained up, and I now have an engineer who has gained some religion around infrastructure security and is pushing that back into our DevOps team. We're going to be collaborating through this whole process. We're starting to document areas of improvement, and we will be delivering a presentation on that to leadership. In fact, another part of my our work with ThreatStack is to develop metrics and a presentation that I will be presenting to our board so that they can understand how are we making progress, where do we see our priorities given our business and our posture. I couldn't have done that without ThreatStack's managed service, certainly not in the time frame that we've been able to do it. And then finally, we'll be launching this refined set of threat stack alerts into our engineering infrastructure. Some of those have already been launched, but we are still in the process of developing those and refining them so that we get to that next step of truly integrating them into our engineering DevOps processes. And that's the part I'm really looking forward to. And that will be happening right around the time Mike is exiting his apprenticeship, which I know is going to continue in a positive direction, and I will finally have a full-time security analyst on my team. I've talked a lot about how Threat Stack helps, but I wanted to hand this over to Threat Stack themselves to dive into a little bit of what they do. It does all of these things and more for us. Threat Stack, you want to take over?
Yeah, absolutely.
A little bit of this?
For sure. Thanks, Martin. So, hey, everybody, my name is Hank Schless. I'm over here at Threat Stack. And so as Martin's been touching on, a big part of our offering here at Threat Stack is this co-managed service, which we're calling our Cloud SecOps program. We really designed it because of that very identifiable talent gap in the market. And we want to make sure that companies like Outreach have the chance to grow and continue to grow as quickly as they want and get to market and continue to innovate and do all of that securely. We found that there were a majority of companies that recognized the importance of having a SecOps program in place, or even just having a strong security posture in the first place for a lot of the reasons that Martin's been discussing, but just didn't have the resources to get there. So that's really why we came out with this SecOps program. We found that it's been really helpful for folks like Martin, his team, and others, and also Martin, props to Mike for giving you permission for that photo. I don't know if I would have done the same. but so we have this SecOps program, and Martin, you've done a great job. Thank you for speaking to how you guys are leveraging that, not just for security itself, but really to enable other parts of your company as well, and your growth there. So the program itself is not only powered by the people and the process behind it, the security analysts that Martin's mentioned. He mentioned a little bit about this roadmap that we helped build out, this framework. I'll go into that in a sec. But really, it's powered by the technology of our cloud security platform. So with a host-based IDS at our core, we're combining that with file integrity monitoring, threat intelligence, vulnerability assessments, and also configuration auditing to really deliver this full platform that monitors both for internal and external threats, and then answers that question of who did what, where, and when. So we have two sides of it. We have the agent-based side of the platform, which captures any system events, user activity, file activity, network access, and then streams that into our back end. So we run a full SaaS model here. We are hosted in AWS ourselves. And really, we run that activity back to detect any anomalous behavior based on a number of out-of-the-box rule sets that we have with the platform. We then alert in real time via tools like Slack, PagerDuty, VictorOps, emails, or as Martin mentioned, we have an API and can hook into things, other alerting tools you may be using, or other dashboards you may have. We also have an agentless side of the platform, which is AWS specific. What we do there is that we focus on configuration auditing of 5 of the major AWS services, being EC2, RDS, S3, IAM, and CloudTrail, and then actually monitor on CloudTrail activity as well. So if you're leveraging other services outside of those 5, or even those 5 included there, we're able to actually alert on activity within them. So really, by using this platform as the backbone of the SecOps program, we're leveraging that host level visibility, combining that with behavior-based analysis to really properly triage and escalate alerts as part of oversight. That's a lot of that partnership that Martin, you were mentioning. Really being able to work through this stuff together. On top of that, being able to build analytics that allow you to really be proactive about security with the insight part of the SecOps program. And then finally, something that Martin mentioned briefly is the maturity framework. So with all this data behind it, we're actually able to kind of we work with our customers to really understand what their ideal security goals are, and then what the roadmap is to get there, and do so with the maturity framework, which is broken down into a few sections. So really looking at what's on the slide here, looking at detect and differentiate. That's really about the IDS side of things, understanding anomalous behavior in real time, being able to understand what's unusual. Maybe someone's just fat fingering a password a few times and getting a few failed login attempts versus something that's truly malicious. And since we're able to alert and let you know in real time and do so in tools that you already live in, really reducing that mean time to know, reducing that mean time to resolve, and helping you get those issues fixed as quickly as possible. Obviously, it's a DevOpsy world out there, so we integrate into, I mentioned some of the ChatOps tools we integrate with. We also integrate with config management tools, Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Salt. But really, the thing that we're really looking at now is integrating into containerized infrastructure. So as Martin mentioned, as a majority, or at least a large percentage of the market is doing, they're looking to start to leverage Docker and other container tools, more widely across the infrastructure. So integrating with tools like that, really continuing to innovate on that container security front has been a real focus of our product team over these last few months, and will continue to do so, in the coming months and coming years. And then, looking at it as one platform, we don't have to string together all this fragmented data for multiple point solutions. As I mentioned, we cover a few aspects of cloud security. And it's great that we have it all one platform, because rather than having to spend the time and resources, building out a custom dashboard, pulling together all these data points from all these different sources, and then having to correlate all that, we have it in one platform there. And then finally, as Martin mentioned, they're going for ISO 27K and SOC 2 Type 2. Compliance is a big use case across our customer base. We have rule sets built out of the box for ISO, for SOC 2, PCI, HIPAA, FFIEC, and others as well. So that's really the bit about Threat Stack. Martin, I don't know if you want to kind of close up with a couple closing remarks here or anything.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say I'm really looking forward to the maturity in container monitoring. Our engineering team is moving that direction quickly. I'm glad we're partnered on that. And I will give just another thumbs up to the maturity framework that Threat Stack has developed. We could have developed this internally on our team, but the fact that this is what Threat Stack does, they've given it good thought. I've seen other maturity frameworks, and theirs makes a ton of sense, and it helps you focus in the areas where you need to focus. We were able to quickly get to an understanding of what our posture looks like and why it looks like that in a few phone calls, rather than weeks of internal back and forth about what our maturity should be or is or looks like. So I'm really a big fan of the maturity framework, and I hope it takes off and grows for more. But with that, I will say, developing internally has been a godsend for outreach. I could have never hired the talent as quickly as I've built it internally, and it's been a huge boon for a smaller security team that has a lot of ground to cover.
All right, great. Well, Martin and Hank, thanks very much for giving such a great presentation. Martin, it was really, really interesting to hear about your adventures, basically, in finding the right talent. So I'm sure the audience has gotten a lot out of your story as well. So I do want to thank you. Martin Rues, a CISO at Outreach.io, and Hank Schless from Threat Stack. Thank you both for joining me today. Also want to remind the audience before we sign off that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any of it, you will be receiving an email that will include a link to the webinar on demand. The webinar is also going to be on the Security Boulevard website. Just go to the website, click on the webinar section on demand, and it should be right there waiting for you. Also, while you're there, go ahead and check out the other webinars that we have, both on demand and upcoming. Hopefully there'll be one or two that pique your interest. But again, Martin and Hank, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for giving us such a great presentation. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, signing off. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.